everyone. Today is going to be a regular movie review, and it is going to be of the 1954 movie and version of 2000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is based on this novel of the same name by Jules Verne. I just wanted to make sure I got that name right. And basically, it follows the tale of Captain Nemo and these other particular characters that come across him and his ship, or submarine, I guess you could say. But it sort of plays out in an interesting way. First off, this movie is a Disney movie. It does have one song in it, pretty much throughout the entire thing, so it's not really a musical. Don't go into thinking that Disney, because Disney did Mary Poppins and all these other ones, Newsies, those are musicals. This one in particular is not a musical for the most part. It's more of just an action-adventure film, and it's a really good action-adventure film. Got good reviews, was really recognized for it during the time. Got a positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes for the most part, and yeah, it's well recognized. It was well recognized back then. I don't think so much now. I mean, I think everybody knows sort of the name 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or 20,000 Leagues, but they don't really. I don't think they identify it so much as a classic, but it is genuinely, in my opinion, a good film. But without further ado, let me sort of explain a little bit the plot. For the most part, it does follow Captain Nemo and these people who come in contact with him as he's making his journey across the ocean. And it starts off with a attack that was that ended up resulting in a mysterious sort of story, because they don't know if it was a monster or if it was something else. And there's this professor and scientist named Professor Pierre Aronnax, and I wanted to make sure that I got that right. He's French, as well as in the novel. And basically, he's given a task by the American government to find this supposed monster that sank the ship. People assume that it was some sort of sea creature, and even though the professor is not really doesn't really think that it's necessarily a monster, he still decides, I'll go on an expedition, on your expedition. And then, as he's taking on this expedition and going on this ship, he and the entire crew on that ship end up being attacked, and he, as well as his assistant, who's played by Peter Lorre, and his name is Conseil, I guess you could say, and as this attack happens, they end up falling off the ship, along with, and this is also a really important character, played by Kirk Douglas, and his name is Ned Land, and basically he's just a I guess you could just call a sailor who's very who's just really full of, I guess, this sort of selfish and yet amusing energy, you could say. And they basically, but all three of them end up being, during this attack, being forced off the ship, end up falling off, and they end up all three finding each other, and then they find this mysterious floating submarine. And this submarine happens to be the submarine of Captain Nemo. And then that's where the whole kind of plot comes in. Because Captain Nemo kind of wants to, you'll see as the plot moves forward, that he is kind of trying to use them in a way for his own kinds of goals and needs, especially when it comes to exploration and discovery. He's aware of the professor because he's read several of his works, and he thinks that these three people could be useful to him. So he kind of takes them in as like a guest slash prisoner. So they're not allowed to leave, but he doesn't really treat them like they're prisoners. Like at one point there's a scene where they're all eating together. And then you come to know the fact that Captain Nemo, he uses a lot of his, his intelligence and his crew to depend on the sea. They basically live on the sea pretty much. They live in that submarine. They're not by any way, shape, or form explorers of anybody else. They're just doing this because, and according to Captain Nemo, because we don't really get a sense of what the crew really thinks. We only really get into Captain Nemo's head. And for the most part, his goal is basically to be rid of the corruptions of the world. He wants to be free from the injustice of the world. And he finds that this world, this ocean, the amounts of ocean that we have, are unexplored. And these are oceans that are free from the corruptions of man. So it makes sense why he is trying to make it so that he doesn't leave or go back onto land so much, because in his mind, people possess land and people are corrupt. And you sort of see how that plays into the plot when, and again, they're not really specific in the movie. This movie kind of leaves things open to a little bit of mystery. But basically, Captain Nemo mentions this hated nation at one point. And this hated nation threatened him and basically killed his wife and son. Because they wanted to know like where his secrets were, because he has made discoveries of the ocean, of his explorations, and he's hidden those secrets because he doesn't want people to know these secrets, because he thinks that the world will use it for a bad purpose, which I think is understandable, considering that his character already thinks that the world is corrupt. So obviously you would want to keep those secrets to yourself, and not tell anyone. And I think this movie is sort of similar in a way like Prometheus is, except Prometheus didn't get as a high rating as this movie did. This movie was highly praised during its time, but for the most part, it has that sort of same formula where, it's better if things are left unknown. It's better if we don't try to discover things, because we may not be prepared for it, and we may not be able to use it for its full potential, and we may use it in the wrong way. So that's basically Captain Nemo's kind of philosophy. So that's basically the structure of his character, and you'll see how this comes to clash with the three other characters. Especially Ned Land, played by Kirk Douglas, like I mentioned previously. And that has to do with the fact that Ned obviously doesn't really want to be, controlled by anybody. He wants his independence. He doesn't want to really technically be on the ship. He wants to escape. And obviously that doesn't go along with Nemo's plans, and you kind of see how these two kind of butt heads at times. And I think Kirk Douglas does a good job of playing that kind of character, because Ned is kind of selfish. At one point he when Nemo tries to show them what they are exploring and what they're doing, like in the ocean, he and the professor's assistant, Conseil, they both discover some gold or treasure, and they try to get this treasure, but they can't, because a shark ends up sort of intervening, and then Captain Nemo doesn't want them to have the treasure, because he already has a full stockpile of it, but he doesn't use it. He doesn't use it for himself or for his selfish needs. He thinks that this is all like secret stuff, and it's not. It shouldn't be like given to the world, and Ned's almost looking at this stuff going, I mean, I want some of that. So you kind of see how Ned's selfishness and Nemo's ambitions kind of collide at times, and it's really amusing. I really do enjoy watching Kirk Douglas in this film, because even though he can be a little bit, I guess you could say a little bit too selfish at times, he still kind of tries to be a little bit sympathetic. He just lacks the capacity to understand of what taking something would mean. He doesn't really think a lot about, I guess, the morality of certain things, whereas Captain Nemo really takes those things into consideration. Ned kind of goes, well, I mean, there's money here, why shouldn't I have some money? I mean, I found this money, so why can't I have it? That's how his moral framework works, because he's just more of a self-centered character. He is a little bit selfish at times. However, he does remain noble, and he does seem to care about other people at some points. So it's kind of like his ambitions don't match with Captain Nemo's ambitions. And even though the professor at times questions Captain Nemo's sort of motivations and doesn't really understand why he does what he does, and the movie does try to explain this, like with the scenario of the Hated Nation. However, it doesn't really dive so much into it. It's just expressed through Nemo, and we kind of get a sense of his character. But we're still left with that sort of mystery about him. It's just one of those things where he likes to keep things secret. He doesn't really like telling people these things, because he feels like he has this personal connection to the sea, and he feels like that he can't share this because it will be used for the wrong means. Not because he is selfish, not because he wants it for himself. He's just scared of what the potential of people knowing this could do, whereas Ned is just completely self-centered. And Captain Nemo is played by James Mason. And for the most part, the acting is really well done. James Mason does a good job playing Captain Nemo. The Paul Lucas as the professor is good. Peter Lorre is quite has sort of like this, I guess, innocence and charm to him, of being sort of like the assistant guy who kind of goes along with things. And Kirk Douglas is Kirk Douglas, and and I really liked Kirk Douglas in this movie, even though he was playing the more self-centered kind of character. I guess maybe he's just a little bit more entertaining for the most part, but Captain Nemo's character is pretty deep in his sort of philosophical interpretation of science and exploration. So, again, something that should be, I guess, taken into mind. And those four characters are basically what drives the movie. the other characters are complete cardboard. Absolutely nothing. They don't even get like lines. And if anything, it's like, yes, sir, or they're literally like robots. And I think that's really what I had a problem with is why aren't Nemo's crewmen given some sort of, I guess, character? Why can't we get into like their motivation as to why they're on the ship? Why isn't that explored? I think that was really a big problem that I had with the movie itself, was just that it focuses on the 4 characters really well, but we don't get a sense of what the crew's motivations are, and I think that's really important, more important than the ones that actually are taken captive, because the crew people literally go with everything that Captain Nemo says and does. And you'll see this towards the end of the film, which is so odd. It's almost like watching a cult. Like, they don't really question him. They don't challenge him. It seems like they're completely engrossed by him and will do anything that he says. And nobody really challenges it except these outsiders who get forced onto the submarine. So, submarine ship, apologize. Meant to say submarine. But for the most part, I can say that this film it does a good job. That one song is really catchy. I remember we did that for choir one year in high school, and it was a lot of fun. And there's also a seal in this movie, and even though I think it's a she, and even though she doesn't do much, seal or sea lion, I can't really tell. I can't tell between the two. I always forget which one is which. It might be a sea lion. It might. Or a seal. I think it may be it might be a seal, though. I get the two mixed up. But it's either a seal or a sea lion. And basically, it's like the cutest thing ever. What they make the seal do is just really cute. Especially with her scene with Kirk Douglas. Just the way that she is sort of presented is just very amusing, and she's really cute to watch. Even though she doesn't really play so much into the plot or anything, she still kind of gives the movie maybe a little bit more lightheartedness, because again, this movie is pretty deep. I mean, this is kind of really, I was kind of shocked seeing this in like a Disney film, because it goes kind of in that really deep, mysterious way that I don't know, it might suck out the kids' attention, but for me, as an adult, it leaves me more engrossed. I think this is more of an adult type Disney film. Not necessarily because there's action, not necessarily because there's certain bits of dialogue or anything. I don't think that really plays a role. I think it's just what it's talking about, that it's maybe hard for kids to understand. But I think adding the seal in does give a little bit of, lightheartedness. Like, okay, yeah, this is Disney. Okay, we are touching on these deep issues, but, here's a seal. Just watch the seal and watch Kirk Douglas play with the seal. And even though it doesn't really play much into the movie, it still provides it with a little bit more lightheartedness. And it kind of gives Nemo a sense of innocence, because the seal or sea lion is his pet. So it kind of shows that even though he's really a mysterious, deeply tormented man, he still has this kind of innocent pet with him. So again, just something worth taking into account, because he was fun. And I remember recently, though, watching Kirk Douglas in an interview, and he was just absolutely charming. He's adorable. And he's very old now. And since this movie came out in 1954, that's a really, really old film. This is a really, really old film. And surprisingly, the effects are actually not that bad for a 1950s movie. I mean, the squid, I don't know how they made that giant squid. There's one scene in particular where there's this giant squid, as they're going through these, because they, again, as the plot moves forward, they're just going through like these little adventures that Nemo and the other people that are taken captive on the boat experience, and his crew as well. And one of those adventures that they run into has to deal with a giant squid. So, and the giant squid actually looks fairly, I want to say it looks fairly realistic for a 1950s movie. I mean, for the most part, I give props to however they made that squid, because that giant squid really looks like something that would be really, by 50 standards, probably really good effects. And I think it's understandable to see why. Although we would be able to probably do more with it. Again, they do present the squid, but again, you're not going to really get so much from... It's not like we can show the squid holding everybody up. It's like they cut to scenes where it's just part of the squid wrapping up somebody, in particular Captain Nemo, and then it just shows the squid itself and its other tentacles and how the others are trying to fight it off, instead of like showing the full picture of the actual squid holding somebody. So again, they had to kind of get around that because this is the 1950s. So just be aware that it is a 1950s movie and not all of the effects are necessarily like effects we have today. But for what they are, I was really surprised that they were still able to make it seem as realistic as they possibly could. So again, I think this is a decent film. I think it follows the original tale very well. It has been a while since I read the original tale, original story. But what I can say out of it is that I think it does address the sort of torment that Captain Nemo is going through, and how these outsiders, as they come into this kind of world that he and his crew have, they sort of realize how certain things are maybe better left off a mystery, and maybe best left under wraps, because the professor is somebody who kind of wants these things to be exposed. He thinks that it will actually help the world if we do expose certain secrets. And he's tried to convince, and you'll try to see how his character's trying to convince Captain Nemo as the plot moves forward, how it is so amazing what he's discovering and what he's doing, that it's of a good investment. And you might be wondering how exactly all of the crewmen and Captain Nemo live on the ship. Well, basically they just use everything from the sea. They use, I think at one point he said they used sperm milk. They like use seafood to make different things, and they just use the sea as their resource, and that's basically how they go about living in this submarine. So if anybody was just wondering how can they just live for so long under a submarine, well, they just use the sea as their resource, as their main resource in particular. And that leads to a lot of humor and offers a little bit of an explanation. But I think that's really all I can say about this film. And also, I think, in a way, I think I should also mention this as well, is this, not only is it a way for Captain Nemo to escape corruption and go into the world of the ocean, I think it's a way for him to have independence. I think he does mention freedom at one point. This place is free because it is free from corruption. It's free from the laws and injustices of man. So it's that sort of philosophy, and I think that's interesting how sort of this way of thinking is incorporated into an adventure sort of film. And I guess that's what you could say made the novel unique, and I think the movie does a good job as well of making that unique. I think that's really all I can say. Any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them. And until next time, bye-bye.